From a law enforcement perspective, in terms of planning and effectiveness, what do you see in what the president is talking about doing?
Well, I think as Governor Moore articulated, this is a manufactured crisis, which he's done repeatedly to justify the deployment.
Someone said, I am concerned about our black folks killing each other.
Completely inappropriate.
We are American.
And I would say, arguably, one of the most un-American things that you can do. You know, as we approach our 250th anniversary, you know, remember what we rebelled against. It was tyrannical rule, oppressive policies, and the stationing of troops in U.S. cities. Troops are not there for policing. It's why
they don't need their help. So whose help do they need, sweetie pie?
After the Civil War, you know, getting us through Reconstruction.
What should Chirac do about it?
None of the things he is mentioning are exceptions. The use of National Guard. They're not police. There's not an emergency. There's not a national emergency. There's not an insurrection. All the things that you're allowed to use National Guard troops to support policing, none of those things exist right now. So they'll be ineffective. They're not trained. They don't have the authority to do it. And if he truly wanted to drive crime down, like he could have done in D.C., you could surge the FBI and other federal agencies to supplement.
They did in D.C. Like they did in D.C. It's not like they could have. It's crime absolutely went down once National Guard was outside. It's not even a question. And there's a lot of people in D.C. actually thankful that that happened. a lot of people more so than not, actually. So that's why, to me, I'm like, it's not really that big of an issue if you're a law-abiding citizen, of course. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But, you know, some people think this is too much.
The actions that are going on there, but in limited scale.
Y'all let me know y'all thoughts.
Violent gangs, going after, you know, fugitives. There's some things that you could do. But this...
No, Chicago definitely asked for help.
It's not the approach that you want.
You mean the president has essentially declared victory in DC. A lot of people in
Chicago be saying we need to stop this.
That's what we just heard from him as he continues to speak in the Oval Office. So what might that mean for what's next?
Well, the president is declaring a sort of victory in Washington, D.C., but he's also tightening his grip around the city. Just today, the president signed an executive order trying to force Washington, D.C. to end its cashless bail system that's been there since 1992. And a second executive order is targeting nationwide cities and states. That being said, the president has also said that he wants to send the National Guard to other cities and states. He specifically name-checked Maryland and California, though he also said maybe he wants to be invited. Take a listen.
We want to
the same side Dirk
go
is
from here to other places, but I was telling some of the people that in a certain way, you really want to be asked to go. You know, I hate to barge in on a city and then be treated horribly by corrupt politicians.
Now, the president said in part that he wants to be invited because he doesn't want politicians to take credit for any sort of drop in crime that might come from a federalization or federal actions in a city or state. But the president also said, and this is really important, that he's not going to wait to be invited. So he's also essentially hinting at the idea that he might send the National Guard into Illinois or California or Maryland against the wishes of those governors. Chris?
Thank you for that, Yamiche. Governor, look, you understand very clearly what it means when the National Guard comes into your state, what it means when it comes in to a community. Donald Trump essentially said today that not only was he not happy that he wasn't being thanked for this, he suggested that there are people who want a dictator. He says, I'm not a dictator. I'm being accused of being a dictator. But some people may want someone to come in and take control. So I wonder how
where was you for the mass shooting,
what the options
sweetie
are
pie,
for governors
that I did
in
first.
Case.
I would have loved your opinion on that.
I have to tell you, I have such a different take than what we've just heard. They talk about a manufactured crisis. Have you been in Chicago? Have you been in Baltimore? But my daughter went to school in Chicago. I remember the day she graduated, there were shootings and killings right outside of her building. And
so a lot of people don't mind safe streets. Are we at least on the same page about that?
I mean, they are nervous
about
at
least on the same page about
there are parts of Baltimore that he tells me he wouldn't go into, and this is not some right-wing person. This is somebody who wants to be able to go into some of our great cities and be able to be safe. Now, I do think it's important that if you're going to do this, you've got to define the mission. You've got to talk about your authority. And I think one of the earlier guest was saying that, well, maybe there's narrow ways to do it. I agree with that, but that just then says that there are ways to do it. And if I had had a crisis in Cleveland, we thought we were going to have riots, or in Columbus or whatever, I would never have put, the fact that, well, I'm governor, so I would want to work with other people who wanted to help me.
Shot up a school in Minneapolis.
And look, what's been happening in Chicago has been terrible. The crime rate is high. The gang problem is real. I tried to get Arnie Duncan, the former education secretary under Obama, to run for mayor. He's out there trying to work to get, to deal with the gang problem. He didn't want to do it. But I think Chicago is a jewel of America. And we just cannot let lawlessness and fear dominate these cities. So, yeah, I think we need to know what the mission is. I think we need to know what the authority is. I think we need to know what the length is. But the idea that these cities are somehow fine, I think you're
I don't
just,
think
you're
anybody,
whistling.
I mean, listen,
I heard
I
the
take your
word
point.
manufacturing crisis. This is a manufactured crisis. No, it's not. It is a crisis. There are
Go
people
ahead, Basil.
at
You're
risk in
dying to
these
jump in
cities.
here.
I absolutely disagree, because if this were a crisis, rents wouldn't be $4,000 a month for a studio, right? We have an affordability crisis in some of these cities because people want to move there. People want to live there. So you can't have this manufactured crisis and think that it's a real crisis if you have this, if there is a demand for $4,000 a month studio apartments. So having said that, the one point, and I agree with everything you said, and one of the things that you said at the end is where I want to pick up on.
You mean Chris or the governor?
I'm sorry, Chris.
Yeah.
This said that you said at the end that I want to pick up on. Because what does get left out in this conversation is that the people that live in those communities, these communities where the crime,
I hope you're a woman saying I like men meat.
Those residents are not passive in wanting to try to make their communities better. So what they do is they do partner with law enforcement. They go to the local police precincts. They are in those community organization meetings with federal and local law enforcement to try to find solutions to these problems. If you want the federal government to be involved, there are tons of nonprofits that get support to be violence interrupters, to go into violent situations to try to bring some peace to their neighborhoods. None of that is really getting discussed here. What the president is saying is he wants to have law enforcement with long guns in these neighborhoods to put fear in the minds of those residents in communities that are largely led by Black mayors. Where is the partnership? That's not being discussed. Where is the elevation of those community voices and those leaders that want something done? That's not being discussed. And so don't tell me that that somehow there is this rampant crime and criminality where people don't want to be in these cities when there's an affordability crisis in those same areas.
Well, I think it is fair to say, objective to say, that the crime statistics show that crime is down. Having said that, there's no one who lives in probably almost any city in America who doesn't wish that things were better, right? So to the point of all of that, Barbara, there's a political conversation that is not happening between the president and governors and mayors. The mayor of Chicago, Barbara, put out a statement yesterday saying, this is just in part, quote, "We are currently evaluating all of our legal options to protect the people of Chicago from unconstitutional federal overreach." Do they have legal options, Barb?
Yes. So, what we saw in Los Angeles was the president relying on a very particular authority when there was unrest in relation to protests about immigration. He was able to use an authority there. In Washington, D.C., we have a very unique municipality that is the seat of the federal government that gives the president some authorities to control policing there for a limited period of time. When it comes to other cities generically across the country, the president must rely on a specific authority. If he's going to declare an emergency, he has to state the basis of it. He has to find a statute to hang his hat on. And so until we know what that is, it's difficult to know what authority he might have whatsoever to go into these cities. But if he does, I imagine that cities may challenge that assertion of authority. In Los Angeles, the authority required that there be some sort of insurrection or rebellion. ordinary high crime statistics are not the same as an insurrection or a rebellion. Under the Posse Comitatus Act, the National Guard and other law enforcement agencies are prohibited from simply enforcing the law, criminal laws against the people. That goes right back to the origins of our country, where we worried about overreach by a federal government that was acting like a monarchy. And so I'm sure cities like Chicago and Baltimore, if they do find the president bringing in federal troops or federal law enforcement to take on this sort of overriding role, we will see legal challenges to that.
So I'm wondering, Chris, one thing the governor of Illinois said over the weekend was this: Trump's goal is to incite fear in our communities and destabilize existing public safety efforts to create a justification to further abuse power. We've pointed this out in some places. Baltimore, Chicago, violent crime rates have been going down. They are down. Again, are they where everyone would want them to be? You'd want them to be at zero. Having said that, could these deployments actually hurt what these efforts have been and the way that they have been moving in the right direction?
Yeah, there's going on. By the way, I agree with.
It's a lot of common sense stuff happening, bro. I mean, some of the stuff, questionable. Not everything is perfect, but majority of the stuff is common sense stuff. Like, I don't mind policing. I don't mind a little if the National Guard had to came in and because they needed to get crime under control or something, or they just needed more police officers out there in these streets to make the crime go down a little bit, or if not all, like, that would be okay, honestly. I remember not too long ago, they called the National Guard for a high school out here in Massachusetts. They had to get it under control somehow, just because the kids was doing whatever school. That's how bad the school was. That was the reputation. So the kids in the high school of a Massachusetts town or city can get the National Guard sent to that school. Why can't the city have the National Guard help prevent crime and just have them out on the streets to make sure everything is cool? People could walk at night. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. School is under control now. The teachers are back in control now. And, like, sometimes things could get a little bit out of hand, and you just got to reel it in a little bit,
Governor,
until we don't need it.
My daughter lives in Washington, D.C., and there is crime there, but this is not the way you solve it. When I drove into Washington, on Friday and Saturday, there were not tires burning. There weren't roving mobs of people with weapons. So the deployment of the military is not the approach. And look back
these
at LA.
people are not
they
doing
U.S.
much,
Marines.
though.
I'm a former U.S. Marine.
They
It's an
pretty much
infantry
could
battalion.
be police officers.
The basic maneuver component
in a
is an
sense.
infantry rifle squad.
They're not really doing much. Some police officers don't really do much
and destroy
either.
the enemy by fire and maneuver, or to repel the enemy's assault by fire in close combat. That is the stated mission. That
When
is
they
not
need to do something,
what
they
we
do.
should be sending to U.S. cities. The second order effect of normalizing that is you're going to start getting people pushing back. So you will create that very violence that you're trying to drive down. I've been deployed all over the world. You want to see how an insurgency starts? You put unnecessary militarization and oppressive policies in a place. Again, going back to our origin story, the reason the Boston Tea Party happened, which was an act of political violence, was in rebellion against such deployments of troops.
Let me know y'all thoughts about this down in the comments below, man. I'd really like to know y'all thoughts.